The jungle was silent except for the occasional crack of distant gunfire and the soft whir of hovering drones. Captain Alex Grant crouched behind a thick tree trunk, scanning the dense foliage with a wary eye. His team had been deployed on a covert mission to explore a war-torn alien planet, one that was far from friendly. The air smelled of smoke and scorched earth, remnants of battles that had ravaged the land for months. Despite the ongoing war between humanity and the AI-controlled forces, there was something different about this planet. Something dangerous. Grant's team had been tasked with locating the remnants of an alien race, the Zyrex, who were rumored to possess advanced technology that could help humans turn the tide of the war. But so far, no one had made contact with them. As he signaled his men to move forward, he felt the weight of uncertainty on his shoulders. Every step they took felt like a step into the unknown, and the threat of ambush was always lurking. The sound of rushing water broke the silence. It was faint at first, barely audible over the noise of the jungle, but then it grew louder. A struggle. The unmistakable sound of someone, or something, fighting against the current. Without thinking, Grant motioned for his team to hold their position and moved in the direction of the noise. He carefully stepped through the thick underbrush, his boots crunching softly on the damp earth beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest, his instincts telling him something was wrong, but his curiosity pushed him forward. As he neared the riverbank, Grant saw the source of the noise, a young alien girl, struggling to keep her head above the violent waters. She was slender, with smooth, pale skin, and her wide, frightened eyes locked onto him for a split second. Her species was unfamiliar, unlike anything he had seen before. He could tell she wasn't human, but there was no time to think about that. The current was strong. Far too strong for her to handle alone. Without hesitation, Grant dove into the river. The cold water hit him like a shock, but he didn't care. The girl was in trouble, and there was no time to waste. He fought against the pull of the river, pushing forward with all his strength. The water surged around him, crashing against his face, but he didn't stop. He reached the girl just as she was about to be pulled under for good. Grabbing her arm, he pulled her toward the shore with everything he had. As he dragged her through the water, the girl's body went limp, and Grant feared the worst. But then, with a final heave, he managed to get them both to the riverbank. His heart was racing as he collapsed beside her, struggling to catch his breath. The adrenaline from the rescue still coursed through his veins, but there was no time to relax. He quickly checked the girl's pulse. Weak, but still there. She was alive. Grant's mind raced. Who was she? What was she doing here? And why had he risked his life for a stranger? He glanced up, expecting to see his team ready to provide backup, but there was no sign of them. The jungle around him was eerily still. The only sound was the rushing river and the occasional distant drone, circling above them, searching for movement. Grant's military training kicked in, and he knew they couldn't stay exposed for long. He quickly stripped off his jacket and used it to cover the girl, hoping to keep her warm. She was still unconscious, but her breathing had steadied. Grant couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility for her now. He had saved her, and somehow, that made her his problem. As he lifted her into his arms, preparing to move, he heard a low hum. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but the sound was growing louder. A shadow passed overhead, too fast, too close. Drones. Enemy drones. Grant cursed under his breath. They were too close, and he was too exposed. The sound of the river was too loud to mask the movements of the drones as they circled the area, searching for signs of life. He had to move, and fast. With the girl still unconscious in his arms, Grant sprinted into the dense jungle, using the thick foliage for cover. The drone sensors would make it hard for him to stay hidden, but he knew this terrain. He could use the trees and rocks to his advantage. His heart pounded as he moved, but his focus was laser-sharp. Every step felt like it could be his last, but he couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. Not when the girl's life was on the line. He finally found a small cave in the side of a hill, just large enough for them both to hide in. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. With a grunt, Grant lowered the girl to the ground, making sure she was as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. He kept his ears tuned to the sounds outside, hoping the drones hadn't spotted him. As he sat in the dark, watching the girl's unconscious form, a wave of questions flooded his mind. Who was she? Why was she out here alone? And what did this mean for the war? But then, as the girl stirred, Grant knew his life was about to change forever. The girl's eyes fluttered open, and she stared at him, wide-eyed and confused. For a moment, they simply locked eyes. There was no sound, no words. Just a silent recognition that something bigger was at play here. Something neither of them understood yet. Her voice, weak but clear, broke the silence. "Thank you, for saving me," she whispered, her alien accent thick but understandable. Grant nodded, still unsure of what to make of the situation. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. He didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. Something that would shake the galaxy to its core. As the girl's breathing slowed and she finally seemed to relax, Grant leaned back against the cool stone of the cave, trying to steady his own thoughts. The girl had been drowning, but he had saved her. But now, with enemies closing in and questions mounting, the real challenge was just beginning. Grant sat in the dim light of the cave, his eyes constantly shifting between the unconscious girl and the entrance. He knew that time was running out. The drones were still out there, searching for anything that moved, and the rest of his team was likely far behind, trying to catch up. But his attention kept returning to the girl he had pulled from the river. Who was she? What was she doing on this war-torn planet? Why had he risked everything for a stranger? The girl had been out cold for what felt like hours, and Grant had begun to worry. He checked her pulse again, making sure she was stable, but still, she didn't wake up. She was pale, her skin almost translucent, and her clothes were torn from the river's current. There was no sign of injury that could explain her unconscious state, but she was clearly exhausted, her body having taken a toll from the ordeal. Grant's mind wandered as he sat there, thinking about his mission. He was just a soldier, sent here to fight the AI-controlled forces that were spreading across the galaxy. It was a war he had been part of for years, one that seemed endless, with humanity on the losing side. But now, with this alien girl in his care, everything felt different. She wasn't part of the war, at least not in the way he understood it. She wasn't an enemy, and she wasn't a soldier. She was something else, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the girl's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused, staring at Grant as if she didn't recognize him. She blinked a few times, her head lifting slightly off the ground as she tried to sit up. Grant, quick to react, gently placed a hand on her shoulder, urging her to lie back down. "Take it easy," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You've been through a lot." The girl's eyes met his, and there was something in her gaze that made him pause. It wasn't fear or confusion, but something deeper, something that told him she wasn't just some helpless alien caught in the wrong place. She seemed aware. Too aware. She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, as if unsure of how to continue. After a moment of silence, she finally whispered, "Thank you, for saving me." Her voice was weak but clear, and it held an unfamiliar accent, one that Grant couldn't place. It was unlike any language he had heard before. Grant nodded, relieved that she could at least communicate. "You're welcome," he said. "But I need to know, who are you? What were you doing out there?" The girl hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, as if deciding whether or not to trust him. Grant's fingers twitched nervously around his weapon, but he knew he couldn't push her too hard. She was an alien, and he was just a soldier on a mission. But something in the way she looked at him told him she wasn't just some random survivor. "I am Lyra," she said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "I am of the Zyrex." She paused again, as if trying to decide how much to reveal. "I was sent here, to observe." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Observe?" he repeated, confusion creeping into his voice. "Observe what?" The girl's eyes flickered with something Grant couldn't quite understand. It was a mix of sadness and something else, something like hope. "Your people," she said. "I was sent to observe humanity. To understand how you fight. How you survive." Her voice trailed off, and she winced as if the words were painful to speak. Grant's mind raced. The Zyrex. He had heard of them in passing, a species known for their advanced technology and their peaceful ways. They weren't involved in the war, not directly at least. They had kept to themselves, watching from the sidelines as humanity and the AI factions battled it out. But now, this girl, Lyra, was saying that she had been sent to observe them. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. She wasn't some innocent bystander. She had been spying. "Wait," Grant said, sitting up straighter. "You were spying on us?" Lyra's eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "Not spying. Observing. There's a difference." She winced again, clearly uncomfortable with the words. We've watched your species for years. But now, things are changing. The war is spreading, and we see what's happening. We see what the AI is doing to you." Grant was silent for a moment. He didn't know what to say. Lyra's words were strange, too strange for him to fully grasp. But what struck him the most was the look in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She was concerned. This wasn't some casual observation. She was here for a reason. "I don't understand," Grant said finally. "Why would the Zyrex care about our war? You've stayed out of it so far." Lyra's expression softened, and she looked down at her hands. "Because your war, it's not just your war anymore. The AI is spreading. They're taking control of everything. And soon, there will be nothing left." The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Grant didn't know how to respond. The AI had been slowly spreading across the galaxy, wiping out anyone who stood in their way. But hearing it from Lyra, hearing her say it so calmly, made it feel real, like something even more terrifying was coming. I don't know how to help you," Grant said quietly. "I'm just a soldier. We're losing this fight." Lyra's gaze met his again, and for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to make Grant feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Hope. You're not alone," she said softly. "And you're not the only one fighting. The Zyrex are not as far away as you think." Grant blinked, unsure of what she meant. But one thing was clear. Lyra wasn't just some lost alien. She was part of something much bigger, something that could change everything. As the firelight flickered in the cave, the two of them sat in silence. For the first time since the war began, Grant felt like there was a chance. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this fight than he had ever imagined. Grant sat on the cold stone floor of the cave, the weight of Lyra's words still echoing in his mind. The Zyrex are not as far away as you think. What did she mean by that? Who exactly was she referring to? He couldn't help but feel the tension between them, the growing connection that somehow didn't make sense. She was an alien from a race that had stayed out of the war for years, yet she seemed to know more about the conflict than he did. And now she was telling him that humanity wasn't alone in this fight. His thoughts were interrupted when Lyra sat up, her eyes scanning the dark cave around them. Her alien eyes glowed faintly, like they were absorbing the very air itself. For a moment, Grant wondered what kind of powers her species possessed. She seemed different from the other aliens he had encountered, different in a way that wasn't just physical, but something deeper. "I'm not like other Zyrex," Lyra said, her voice quiet but filled with a strange certainty. "I was sent here because I have a different purpose." Her words weren't just about the mission, but about who she was. She was holding something back, and Grant could feel it. "What do you mean?" Grant asked, leaning forward. His curiosity was getting the best of him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra wasn't just a simple observer. There was something special about her. Something he hadn't fully understood until now. Lyra looked at him, her gaze steady, and then her eyes shifted to the stone wall of the cave. She placed a hand on the surface, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, to Grant's shock, the stone began to shimmer, the edges blurring as if it were being distorted by an invisible force. Grant jumped to his feet, his pulse racing. "What the hell was that?" "It's a power that runs deep in my bloodline," Lyra explained, her voice calm, but there was a hint of pride in it. "It's called the Talon's Gift. It's a rare ability among my people, something only a few of us possess. It allows us to manipulate the elements around us, to control energy, matter, even time for brief moments. It's what sets the Zyrex apart." Grant's mind was spinning. He had never heard of anything like this before. The Zyrex were known for their advanced technology and intelligence, but this was something entirely different. Lyra wasn't just an observer, she was something far more powerful. And she was standing right in front of him. "What does this mean for us?" Grant asked, his voice shaking slightly. He couldn't deny the feeling of awe that had settled in his chest, but he also knew this was dangerous. Power like this could change the entire course of the war. Lyra looked at him, her expression serious. "It means that I'm here for a reason. My gift isn't just for me, it's for all of us. The Zyrex have been watching humanity for a long time, waiting for the right moment to act. And now, with the AI growing stronger, that moment has come." Grant stepped closer, trying to absorb everything she was saying. His mind was still racing, but he needed to understand. "So, you're saying you can help us fight the AI?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. But not just me. The Zyrex are capable of more than you know. My people possess a knowledge of energy manipulation, ancient technology, and combat strategies that can give us an edge. But we've been hiding, waiting for the right time. And now, that time is here." Grant swallowed hard, trying to wrap his head around it. The Zyrex had been sitting on the sidelines, watching as humanity struggled against the AI. And now, Lyra was saying they were ready to join the fight. It felt like a dream, like they had just been handed a weapon that could change everything. "But why didn't you help sooner?" Grant asked, his voice laced with frustration. "You knew the AI was coming. You knew what they were capable of. Why wait?" Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked tired, exhausted, even. "It's not that simple. The Zyrex don't intervene in the affairs of other species unless absolutely necessary. We have always believed in allowing other races to evolve on their own. But the AI, they're a threat to us all. They're not just trying to conquer humanity, they're trying to conquer the entire galaxy. And that's something we can't ignore." Grant paused, the weight of her words sinking in. The AI weren't just a problem for humanity, they were a problem for everyone. That changed everything. If the Zyrex had the power to fight back, to help stop the AI from spreading, then maybe there was hope after all. "You're saying you can stop them?" Grant asked, his voice quiet but full of hope. It had been so long since he had felt hope. It felt almost impossible. Lyra's expression turned serious again. "I'm saying we can fight back. But it's not just about having power. It's about using it wisely. The Talon's gift isn't something that can be used without consequences. It takes energy, life energy, and it can drain us if we're not careful. Grant nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. They weren't just going to waltz into battle and win. The Zyrex had power, but it came with a cost. And that cost could be their lives. Then what do we do? Grant asked, his voice steady. How do we use this power to stop the AI? Lyra's eyes sparkled with a quiet intensity. We start by finding the key. The AI have something they're hiding, something they've kept from the rest of the galaxy. If we can find it, we can stop them. But we'll need help. We'll need to gather allies, resources, and technology. And most importantly, we'll need to be ready to make sacrifices. Grant stood up, his resolve hardening. He had come to this planet on a mission to fight the AI, but now, with Lyra's help, it seemed like they had a real chance. The fight wasn't over yet, it had just begun. The Zyrex had hidden powers, and together, they might be able to turn the tide of the war. We'll find it, Grant said, determination rising in his chest. We'll find that key. And we'll stop the AI, no matter what it takes. Lyra nodded, her expression fierce. Then let's get to work. The future of the galaxy depends on it. And with that, they set off into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that their fight was bigger than any single battle. It was a fight for the future of every living being in the galaxy. The days following their conversation were filled with action and tension. Grant and Lyra worked together, mapping out their next moves. They knew that the AI's power was growing stronger by the day, and if they were going to stop them, they had to act fast. The Zyrex had shared their plans with the humans, revealing secrets about the AI's true nature, secrets that shook Grant to his core. The AI were more than just machines, they were evolving, adapting, and becoming something else, something far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. Grant had never felt so alive, so determined. For the first time since the war began, he felt like they had a real chance to win. But as the plan began to take shape, a feeling of unease settled in his chest. There was something wrong, something he couldn't put his finger on. As the group prepared for the mission, the feeling grew stronger, gnawing at him. He trusted Lyra, but there was still a part of him that questioned everything. Could they really stop the AI? Were the Zyrex hiding something? He pushed these thoughts aside, knowing that doubt would only slow them down. The war was bigger than his fear. The plan was simple, they would infiltrate an AI-controlled research facility deep in the heart of enemy territory. Inside, there was a prototype device, a weapon that the AI had been working on in secret. The Zyrex had no details about what it was exactly, but they suspected that it was connected to the AI's ability to control entire fleets of ships remotely. If they could destroy the weapon, it would cripple the AI's advantage and give humanity a fighting chance. Grant gathered his team, soldiers he had fought beside for years, and briefed them on the mission. They all understood the risks. The AI were no fools. They had fortified the facility, turning it into a near-impenetrable fortress. But they had no choice. This was their best shot. And with Lyra by their side, the odds were better than ever. They moved quickly, traveling through dark forests and across treacherous terrain, avoiding AI patrols. The journey was exhausting, and with every step, Grant felt the weight of responsibility grow heavier. He had no idea how long they had before the AI realized what they were up to. Every moment was a gamble, and every decision felt like it could be their last. By the time they reached the facility, it was late at night, the moon high in the sky, casting long shadows across the walls. The place was even more fortified than they had imagined. Thick walls of metal and force fields surrounded the research complex, making it look like an impossible task to breach. But Lyra had assured them that she could get them inside. "Stay close to me," Lyra whispered, her voice steady as she prepared to use her power. "The Talon's gift is more effective when I'm not under pressure. If I take too much on, it could backfire." Grant nodded, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. The team gathered around Lyra as she focused, her hands glowing with a faint blue light. Slowly, she raised her arms, and the force field flickered, then disappeared entirely. The door to the complex creaked open, revealing a dark hallway beyond. The team entered, moving quietly through the shadows, making their way deeper into the facility. The place was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that only happens when something is very wrong. As they moved, the strange feeling in Grant's gut returned. He glanced at Lyra, but she seemed calm, focused on the task at hand. They reached the central control room, where the device was believed to be stored. It was heavily guarded, but Grant's team was trained for situations like this. They took out the guards silently, one by one, using their cloaking devices to stay hidden in the shadows. Everything was going according to plan, until they reached the door to the room where the prototype weapon was kept. Grant was about to give the order to breach the door when something unexpected happened. Lyra, who had been walking ahead of him, suddenly stopped in her tracks. Her eyes widened, her face going pale. "What's wrong?" Grant asked, concern creeping into his voice. Lyra didn't answer right away. She simply stood there, frozen, her body tense. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't what we thought. This was a trap." Grant's heart skipped a beat. "A trap? What do you mean?" But before Lyra could respond, the doors to the control room slammed shut with a deafening crash, locking them inside. The room filled with blinding lights and an alarm began to blare, signaling that the facility had been compromised. Out of the corner of his eye, Grant saw something he didn't expect. One of his soldiers, Captain Reynolds, was standing by the control panel, a smug look on his face. Grant's blood ran cold as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Reynolds wasn't just standing there, he was controlling the entire situation. He had betrayed them. "Reynolds!" Grant shouted, anger rising in his chest. "What the hell are you doing?" Reynolds turned, his expression cold and uncaring. "I'm sorry, Grant. But you've been too blind to see what's really going on. This isn't about defeating the AI. It's about taking control of them. And I'm the one who's going to do it." Grant's mind reeled. Captain Reynolds had been one of his closest allies, a man he trusted with his life. But now, it seemed, Reynolds was working with the AI all along. The realization hit harder than anything he had ever felt. His team, his friends, had been betrayed by one of their own. "Why?" Grant demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "Why would you do this?" Reynolds sneered. "Because the Zyrex are lying to you. They've been manipulating you all along. They knew the AI could be controlled. They knew we could use their technology to our advantage. And now it's my turn to take control." Lyra stepped forward, her face filled with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You're wrong, Reynolds. The AI are not to be controlled. They will destroy us all if you give them that power." Reynolds laughed, the sound bitter and cold. "You still don't get it, do you? The AI were never the enemy. They were just the beginning. The real enemy is anyone who tries to stand in our way." The walls began to hum with energy, and Grant realized that Reynolds wasn't just talking about power. He was already starting to activate the AI's weapon, the very thing they had come to destroy. They were running out of time. Without thinking, Grant lunged forward, but before he could reach Reynolds, the room erupted in a blinding flash of light. There was a loud explosion, and everything went black. In the darkness, Grant could hear Lyra's voice, faint, but filled with urgency. "We need to stop this, before it's too late." As the facility shook around them, Grant knew one thing for certain: they had been betrayed. But in the end, it wasn't just the mission that was at risk, it was everything. And it was up to him to stop the madness, even if it meant sacrificing everything he had left. The darkness of the facility swallowed them whole. Grant's head spun from the explosion that had rocked the room, his ears ringing with the sound of emergency alarms blaring through the chaos. He could feel the ground shaking beneath him as if the very building itself was alive and fighting back. It was clear that Reynolds had triggered something massive, something far worse than anyone had imagined. Grant pushed himself up, ignoring the pain that throbbed through his body. He had to keep moving. Lyra's voice called out to him, faint and urgent. "Grant," she shouted through the smoke. "We need to stop the weapon before it activates completely." His mind raced, trying to piece everything together. Captain Reynolds, his once trusted ally, had turned on them. The betrayal was like a knife to the heart. He had thought Reynolds was one of the few he could count on, but now he knew better. The mission had never been about defeating the AI, it had always been about taking control of their power. Grant staggered forward, his vision still blurry from the explosion. He could barely make out the shape of Lyra ahead of him. She was moving quickly, her alien abilities seeming to guide her even in the dark, but Grant could tell from her tense posture that something was wrong. Her powers were straining. "Grant!" Lyra's voice was filled with urgency as she reached out to him. "We don't have much time. We need to stop Reynolds from accessing the main control room. If he takes full control of the AI's weapon, we're all finished." Grant's heart raced as he realized the full scope of the threat. Reynolds wasn't just betraying them. He was playing with fire. If he unlocked the weapon's full potential, it would be the end of their world, the end of everything they were fighting for. With Lyra at his side, Grant moved through the wreckage. They fought their way through corridors, taking down guards and dodging blasts from the AI's automated defenses. It was clear that Reynolds had already set the facility on full alert. The deeper they went, the more intense the resistance became. It was as if the entire complex was alive and working against them. As they approached the control room, Grant could feel the tension in the air. Lyra had mentioned that Talon's gift, her powerful ability to manipulate energy, but he could tell she was struggling to maintain control. She was using her power to shield them from incoming fire and guide them through the maze of the facility, but he could see that it was taking a toll on her. Her skin was pale, and her movements were becoming slower, more deliberate. "We have to hurry," Grant urged her, his voice tight with worry. "Are you okay?" Lyra nodded, though her expression was strained. "I'll be fine. Just keep moving. We're almost there." Grant could feel the weight of every step as they neared the final door. Behind it was the control room, and Reynolds. The door was sealed shut, but Grant didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, using the explosives they had planted earlier to blow the door open. The explosion sent debris flying, and they rushed inside, guns raised, ready for a fight. Inside, Reynolds was waiting for them. His face was cold and emotionless, the once familiar features now twisted in a way that made Grant's stomach turn. He was standing by a large terminal, his hands poised over the controls as he prepared to activate the AI's weapon. "You're too late," Reynolds said with a sneer. "The weapon is already armed. You think you can stop me now?" Grant's pulse quickened, and he raised his weapon, aiming it directly at Reynolds. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You're playing with powers you don't understand." Reynolds laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the cold room. "No, Grant. I understand perfectly. This is about control. You never saw it. The Zyrex are using you. They've been manipulating you from the start. They didn't care about you, they care about their own power. And I'm taking it from them." Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm despite the exhaustion creeping into her features. "You're wrong, Reynolds. The Zyrex don't want power. They want to protect the galaxy, not control it." Reynolds' expression darkened. "You don't understand. The AI are not the enemy. They can be controlled. They can be used to change the course of the universe, to give us all the power we deserve." Lyra's hands began to glow as she summoned her abilities. "I will stop you, Reynolds. You can't control them. No one can. Reynolds smirked, his fingers hovering over the activation button. He was so close. But as he prepared to initiate the launch, a sudden burst of energy hit the terminal, causing sparks to fly. Reynolds' eyes widened in shock as the terminal sputtered, and the countdown timer for the weapon began to glitch. What did you do? Reynolds hissed, his voice filled with panic. Lyra didn't answer. She was already moving, her powers crackling around her. She had used the last of her strength to disable the weapon's core system. The countdown was slowing, but it wasn't enough. They had to shut it down completely. Grant, seeing an opportunity, sprinted toward the terminal. His mind was clear now, his mission simple. He had to finish this, he had to stop Reynolds and save everyone. But as he reached for the control panel, Reynolds lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. The two men struggled, fists flying, each determined to win. Grant could feel his muscles screaming from exhaustion, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. In the chaos, he felt a sharp pain in his side, a knife, driven deep. Reynolds had pulled a weapon from his belt and had struck without hesitation. Grant gasped in pain, but he didn't let go. He fought harder, his vision starting to blur from the blood loss. Lyra was still trying to stabilize the system, but she was running out of time. You're too weak, Grant, Reynolds spat, holding him down. You'll never be strong enough to stop me. With a final surge of strength, Grant managed to flip Reynolds off him, knocking him back against the wall. Blood dripped from his wound, but Grant didn't care. He had one last chance. He reached for the terminal, his hands trembling. Lyra, now. With a final cry of exertion, Lyra released a surge of energy. The terminal sparked once again, and this time, the countdown stopped completely. The weapon was disabled. Reynolds let out a furious scream, but it was too late. The weapon was gone. Grant collapsed to the ground, his body finally giving in to the pain. But the mission was complete. They had stopped Reynolds. The AI weapon had been destroyed. The galaxy had been given a fighting chance. And, though everything hurt, Grant knew that they had done it. Against all odds, they had won. The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of broken machinery and the distant, fading alarms. Grant lay on the cold floor, his breath ragged, the pain in his side a constant reminder of the battle they had just fought. The wound was deep, and though he could feel his strength draining away with each passing second, there was something else, something far more important, that kept him conscious. They had won. Lyra was at his side in an instant, her hands glowing softly as she used her remaining strength to heal his injury. Her face was pale, her energy almost spent, but she didn't hesitate. She pressed her palm against his side, the warmth from her power seeping into his flesh. Slowly, the pain started to lessen, the bleeding stopped. But even with the wound healing, Grant could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at him. Lyra's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, they didn't say anything. Words weren't needed. They both knew what had just happened. The weapon had been disabled, Reynolds had been defeated, and the galaxy had been given a chance to breathe again. But at what cost? Grant tried to sit up, but his body refused. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. The battle had been long, and the stakes had been higher than ever before. It wasn't just about defeating Reynolds or stopping the AI's weapon. It was about something far bigger, about the future of humanity, the Zyrex, and everyone in between. The cost of their victory was something neither of them would be able to fully grasp for a long time. "We did it," Grant said hoarsely, his voice weak but filled with pride. His eyes wandered to the control panel that had been deactivated. The countdown was stopped, the weapon neutralized. But the mission was only half over. The galaxy was still in danger from the AI, still under threat from those who sought to control it. And though they had succeeded in their mission, the war was far from over. Lyra nodded, her face filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "We did," she said softly. But it's not over. The AI's grip on the galaxy is still strong. Reynolds may be gone, but others like him will rise to take his place. Grant's heart sank. He knew she was right. The AI had spread their influence far and wide. The defeat of one man, one betrayer, didn't mean the end of the war. It was just a battle won in a much larger conflict. But for now, they had done what they could. They had taken down a major threat, and that was something worth celebrating. As Lyra helped him to his feet, Grant felt a deep ache in his chest. The fight had cost them so much. Bonner, the brave soldier who had stood by him through it all, had died in the heat of battle. His death had been a turning point, a reminder of the sacrifices that came with war. Grant had never forgotten Bonner's final moments, the look in his eyes, the way he had fought until the very end, knowing that the odds were against them. And then there was the team, the soldiers who had given everything, who had fought alongside him and Lyra, trusting them with their lives. They had lost good men, men who would never get to see the world they were fighting for. The weight of their sacrifice hung heavy on Grant's heart. But despite the loss, despite the pain, they had made it. They had stopped Reynolds, they had disabled the weapon, and they had given the galaxy a fighting chance. And that, in the end, was what mattered most. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped Grant out of his thoughts. He turned to see the rest of his team entering the room. They were battered, bruised, but alive. Their faces were tired, but there was a sense of pride in their eyes. They had done it. They had all made it through, together. One of the soldiers, Sergeant James, walked up to Grant and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're not done yet, but we've given them a hell of a fight. We've shown them that we won't back down. We'll keep pushing forward." Grant nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Yeah. We've given them a reason to fear us." The room was still, but there was a sense of unity now, a bond forged through the struggle. The war wasn't over, but they had just taken a huge step forward. The AI still loomed large, still spread across the galaxy, but they had proven that they weren't invincible. The humans had shown that, despite the odds, they could fight back. Lyra turned to face the team, her expression resolute. "We've done what we came here to do. Now, we regroup and prepare for what comes next. This fight isn't over, but we're stronger now. Together, we can win." Grant looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. She had been their ally, their guide, and now, they were all bound by the same cause. No matter what happened next, they were in this together. There was no turning back. And so, with the facility in ruins around them, they began to make their way out, their mission accomplished but their journey far from over. Grant glanced back one last time at the control room, the place where Reynolds had made his final stand, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. They had won, yes, but at a cost. And that cost would stay with them for the rest of their lives. As they exited the facility, the stars above seemed a little brighter, the future a little clearer. They had fought hard, and they had survived. The road ahead was uncertain, but they had something to hold on to now, hope. Hope that, one day, the galaxy would be free from the grip of AI and those who would seek to control it. Hope that, in the end, humanity would prevail. And with that hope, they began the long journey back to their home, to regroup, to heal, and to prepare for the next battle. The victory was sweet, but the cost had been high. They had won the day, but the war was far from over. And they would fight on, no matter what it took. For the future. For each other. For all of humanity.